In this episode, we're going to talk about business cases and benefits realization as a governance discipline, because beginners often think funding decisions are mainly about whether an idea sounds useful or whether a leader is enthusiastic. In enterprise IT governance, funding is one of the strongest levers leaders have, and that leverage only creates value when the enterprise funds work based on clear reasoning and then verifies that the promised benefits actually happen. When business cases are weak or missing, projects can be approved on charisma, urgency, or habit, and the enterprise ends up spending money without being able to explain what it gained. When benefit realization is not tracked, the enterprise can celebrate delivery while quietly failing to achieve outcomes, which trains the organization to repeat the same wasteful pattern. Ensuring business cases and benefit realization exist before funding decisions means governance requires clarity before money is committed, and it requires accountability after delivery, so value is not assumed. This topic matters for the exam because many scenario questions describe poor outcomes like cost overruns, duplicated initiatives, and low-value delivery, and the governance fix is often to strengthen investment discipline. By the end, you should be able to explain what a business case is, why benefit realization is a separate and essential step, and how governance makes both parts routine and enforceable. Before we continue, a quick note. This audio course is a companion to our course companion books. The first book is about the exam and provides detailed information on how to pass it best. The second book is a Kindle-only ebook that contains 1,000 flashcards that can be used on your mobile device or Kindle. Check them both out at cyber.author.me in the Bare Metal Study Guide series. A business case is not a marketing pitch, and it is not a long report written to justify a decision that was already made. In governance terms, a business case is a structured argument that explains why an investment should be made, what outcomes are expected, what resources are required, what risks and constraints exist, and how success will be measured. It helps leaders compare competing requests and decide where limited funding should go. A good business case makes assumptions explicit, such as expected demand, expected operational savings, or expected reductions in risk exposure. It also makes trade-offs visible, such as whether the investment will require diverting staff from other priorities or whether it introduces new complexity that increases long-term operating cost. For beginners, it helps to think of a business case as the bridge between an idea and a responsible decision, because it turns enthusiasm into evidence and makes the decision explainable. Governance uses business cases to prevent impulsive funding and to reduce political influence, because decisions can be tied to criteria rather than to personal power. On the exam, when a scenario involves unclear priorities or poor value delivery, requiring business cases before funding is often a core governance improvement. Benefits realization is related but distinct, and the distinction is one of the most important beginner lessons in governance. Benefits realization means confirming that the benefits promised in the business case actually occur after the investment is delivered, and it includes managing the activities needed to make those benefits real. Many investments fail to deliver benefits not because the technology is broken, but because the organization does not change behavior, processes, or training in the way the benefits assumed. For example, a new system may be deployed, but if staff do not use it properly or if data quality remains poor, the expected efficiency gains may not appear. Governance therefore treats benefits realization as an ongoing accountability process, not as a one-time approval step. It requires that someone owns the benefit outcomes, that measures are defined, and that reviews occur after delivery to assess whether value is being achieved. If benefits are not appearing, governance requires corrective action, such as additional training, process adjustment, or even reconsidering whether the investment should continue. Beginners often assume that delivering a project is the same as delivering value, but governance distinguishes output from outcome, and benefit realization is where that distinction becomes real. Exam questions often test whether you can recognize that value must be verified and managed, not merely promised. Before funding decisions are made, governance must ensure that the business case is complete enough to support an informed choice. Complete enough does not mean perfect. It means leaders can understand the expected outcomes, the costs, the risks, and the measures that will indicate success. A business case should explain the problem or opportunity in enterprise terms, not only in technical terms, because governance decisions are made based on business impact. It should identify who will benefit, how benefits will be achieved, and what dependencies exist, such as needing data changes, process redesign, or vendor support. It should include a realistic view of constraints, like budget limits, time pressure, and the availability of skilled staff. It should also include a high-level plan for how governance will monitor progress and handle deviations, such as what triggers escalation. If a business case avoids these elements, leaders are forced to guess, and guessing is how waste and risk enter the portfolio. Governance makes completeness a funding gate by requiring that funding requests meet defined criteria before approval. For beginners, the idea of a funding gate is simply that the enterprise does not commit resources until the request is clear enough to be accountable. A useful way to understand why governance requires business cases is to see funding as an enterprise trade-off, not a simple yes or no. Every funded initiative uses resources that cannot be used elsewhere, so funding decisions must consider opportunity cost. Opportunity cost means what the enterprise gives up by choosing one investment over another, which could include delaying a compliance improvement, postponing reliability work, or missing a market opportunity. Business cases help governance compare these trade-offs by providing consistent information so decisions do not depend on who shouts loudest. Business cases also help identify when multiple initiatives are trying to solve the same problem in different ways, which can lead to duplication and inconsistent outcomes. Without business cases, enterprises often fund overlapping initiatives because they cannot see the full picture. Governance uses business case discipline to reduce this waste and to keep the portfolio aligned to strategy. Beginners sometimes treat funding as a simple budget management activity, but in governance, it is strategic steering. When you view funding this way, it becomes clear why business cases must exist before funding decisions, because steering without information is reckless. Another important beginner concept is that business cases should include risk and compliance considerations, because funding decisions can create risk that is expensive to fix later. If an initiative touches regulated data or critical services, the business case should address how compliance obligations will be met and what evidence will be needed. If an initiative introduces a new vendor or technology dependency, the business case should address third-party risk and the impact on resilience. If an initiative promises speed or cost savings by reducing controls, the business case should surface the risk trade-off explicitly, so leaders can decide whether that risk is acceptable. Governance is responsible for ensuring these risk elements are not hidden or minimized, because risk is part of the cost of an investment even if it does not appear as a budget line. For beginners, it helps to recognize that risk is not an abstract concept. It is the possibility of loss, disruption, or harm that can undermine enterprise objectives. A business case that ignores risk is incomplete because it presents a one-sided picture that encourages irresponsible decisions. In exam scenarios, answers that require risk evaluation as part of funding decisions often align with governance best practice, especially in regulated or high-stakes environments. Once funding is approved, benefits realization becomes the governance mechanism that keeps the investment honest over time. That means governance must define who owns the benefits, because benefits are not automatically delivered by IT teams alone. Often the business side must own the benefits because they involve process changes, user adoption, and operational behavior. IT teams may own delivery and service performance, but business leaders often own whether the promised outcomes, like reduced processing time or improved customer retention, actually occur. Governance makes this ownership explicit to prevent a common failure pattern where IT is blamed for not delivering business outcomes that required business process changes. Benefits realization also requires measures that are defined before funding, because it is unfair and ineffective to invent success criteria after delivery. Measures might include cost reductions, cycle time improvements, error reductions, customer satisfaction improvements, or risk reductions, depending on the nature of the investment. Governance then establishes review points where performance against these measures is assessed and where corrective actions are decided if outcomes are not being achieved. For beginners, the key idea is that benefits realization is the accountability loop that connects funding decisions to enterprise outcomes. Without it, the enterprise spends money and hopes for the best. It is also important to understand that benefit realization often requires enabling work that is not part of the technology build, and governance must ensure that enabling work is planned and funded. Enabling work can include training, change management, data cleanup, process redesign, and adjustments to performance expectations. Many business cases assume benefits will appear simply because a system exists, which is rarely true. For example, automation benefits may require standardizing inputs and training staff to follow consistent workflows, and without that, automation may fail or produce errors. Customer experience benefits may require adjusting support processes and ensuring data quality, not only launching a new interface. Governance improves benefit realization by requiring that business cases identify these enabling dependencies and that plans exist to deliver them. It also ensures that benefits reviews consider whether enabling work was completed, rather than declaring the investment a failure without understanding the context. Beginners sometimes interpret benefits gaps as purely technical problems, but governance treats them as systemic issues involving people, process, and technology together. By embedding enabling work into business cases, governance makes benefit realization more realistic and less dependent on luck. A common failure pattern in enterprises is continuing to fund initiatives even when benefits are not appearing, because stopping or changing course feels politically difficult. Governance benefits realization includes the courage to reassess and adjust, which can mean redesigning an initiative, narrowing its scope, or even ending it if it no longer makes sense. This is not wasteful. It is responsible stewardship of resources. The sunk cost effect is a psychological trap where people continue investing because they already invested, even when evidence shows the investment is not delivering value. Governance counters this trap by focusing on future value and by requiring evidence-based decisions at review points. Benefits realization reviews provide the opportunity to ask whether the enterprise is still on track to achieve outcomes, whether assumptions have changed, and whether constraints require a new approach. For beginners, this is an important lesson. Governance is not about defending past decisions. It is about making the best decisions going forward. When exam scenarios describe ongoing projects that are failing to deliver or constantly overrunning, a governance answer that strengthens benefit review and decision gates is often correct. This reflects mature governance that values evidence over ego. Business cases and benefits realization also help governance manage transparency and stakeholder trust, because they make decisions explainable. When stakeholders understand why an investment was funded and what benefits were expected, they are more likely to support governance decisions even if their own requests were deferred. Transparency also reduces suspicion that funding decisions are political or arbitrary. Benefits realization transparency further supports trust by showing that leadership cares about outcomes, not just about launching projects. It also creates organizational learning, because when benefits are realized, the enterprise can understand what worked and repeat it, and when benefits are not realized, the enterprise can understand why and avoid repeating the same mistakes. Without this learning loop, organizations cycle through repeated investments that fail for the same reasons, often blaming individuals rather than fixing systemic issues. Governance uses business cases and benefits tracking to shift the organization from opinion-based decision-making to evidence-based stewardship. For beginners, it helps to see this as a maturity move. It is how an enterprise moves from spending money to investing money. When you answer exam questions, options that increase transparency and learning through benefits realization often align with governance intent. To make this idea practical, imagine a funding request for a new system that promises faster processing and improved customer satisfaction. A weak governance approach would approve the request because it sounds good, then declare success when the system goes live, even if customer satisfaction does not change. A strong governance approach would require a business case that defines what faster processing means in measurable terms, what training and process changes are needed, what risks exist, and who owns the outcome. It would then fund the initiative with the expectation that benefits will be measured after delivery, with review points that ask whether outcomes are appearing and what corrective actions are needed. If benefits are not appearing because staff are using old workflows, governance would require the business side to address adoption rather than blaming the technology. If benefits are not appearing because assumptions were wrong, governance would adjust the plan and possibly redirect resources. This example shows how business cases and benefits realization make funding decisions responsible because they connect spending to outcomes through accountability and evidence. Beginners should notice that this approach also reduces conflict because expectations are defined early and ownership is clear. Exam scenarios often test whether you can choose this disciplined approach rather than a simplistic approve and hope pattern. To close, ensuring business cases and benefits realization exist before funding decisions means governance requires clarity, accountability, and measurable outcomes before committing resources, and it requires follow-through after delivery, so value is verified rather than assumed. A business case provides the structured reasoning that explains expected benefits, costs, risks, constraints, and measures, enabling leaders to compare trade-offs and prioritize responsibly. Benefits realization creates the accountability loop that ensures those promised outcomes are tracked, owned, and acted on, recognizing that value often depends on people and process change as much as on technology delivery. Governance uses these practices to prevent impulsive funding, reduce duplication, manage risk and compliance obligations, and create organizational learning that improves future decisions. When you can distinguish output from outcome and insist on evidence-based stewardship, you are practicing the kind of leadership reasoning that CGEIT is designed to validate. In the next episode, we will connect this investment discipline to enterprise architecture and coherence over time, because investments only stay valuable when technology choices remain aligned and manageable as the enterprise evolves.
Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit DailyCyber.News.